Hey, thanks for stopping by my channel. My name is Beach Troll. Today I'm going to be working on the 2006 Chevy Cobalt. I'm going to be replacing the strut assembly, which is this piece right here. Everything's all combined, the spring, the shock, and it also comes with 3 bolts. So you want to use the new hardware. Now before we start replacing the strut assembly, there's a couple of things you want to do. Obviously you want to jack up your car, put it on jack stands. You want to open the hood because you're going to have access to these bolts for the top of the strut. You want to put your emergency brake on, and you want to put wheel chocks, or if you don't have wheel chocks, a thick piece of wood behind each rear tire on both sides. Now I'm doing the driver's side first. You want to get some WD-40 or penetrating oil, and you want to spray down these bolts. There's an 18mm bolt up top here. You want to spray that down. There are also 2 other 18mm bolts, one here and one under the ABS sensor here. We want to spray them down. Where your ABS sensor is, we're going to pop this out just so we don't damage it as we're taking out the bottom bolt. This is being held in by the there's a zip tie on here, so we're just going to cut that off. And it was probably zip tied because the locking mechanism for the ABS is broken. So on yours, you just take a pair of needle nose pliers, just gently press in, and the ABS will pop out, and just move it off to the side gently. What you want to do is take your 18mm open-ended wrench, and right behind that top bolt, just feel around in between the bushing. You'll get it on the nut on the back side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an air gun to get this off. It just makes it a little bit easier. You can use, a breaker bar to break this free, but it's easier if you use the air gun. You just want to support the wrench with your one hand. Okay, there's the nut, and that's also 18mm. Just put this off safely on the side because we're going to reuse this later to put the new strut on. And then just move this off to the side. Now we're going to remove the bolt that's underneath the ABS. That's also an 18mm. And after we get that nut off, we're going to go to the top one above the ABS, which is also 18mm, and take that one off. Now the nut's going to come off. You don't have to hold the head of the bolt because this bolt is self-locking in there. So you don't need a wrench to hold the head of the bolt. We're just going to screw off the nut. That's the top. And now we'll do the bottom. Now with the 2 nuts off, you want to put them back on and just thread them on. Just a bit, so you don't expose the tail end of the bolt. You just want to do it like that. I don't know if you can see that. Just like that. You just want to thread it on, and you're going to do the same for the top. You're going to do the same for the top bolt up here. We're going to thread that nut on as well. And the reason we're doing this is because we have to use a hammer to tap out the bolt itself, because as I said, it's self-locking in there, and we want to protect the threads on the end. That's why we're putting the nut back on. Now we're just going to take a hammer and just pound on the end of that nut just to break free the bolt, and we're going to do the same on the top. So as you can see, the head of the bolt, the top and the bottom, came out. Now we're just going to take off those nuts all the way, top and bottom. And as I said, save those because you're going to need them when we put it back on. We're in the engine bay now with the hood open on the car. So this is the top of the strut assembly. It's held in by these three 13mm bolts. We're going to loosen up the one closest to the headlight. Then what we want to do is thread it on about 4 or 5 threads, and then we're going to take out the other 2 completely. What this is going to do is allow the strut to lower a little bit so we can get those bolts out down below. Just saw that drop. Okay, now the strut itself came down when we loosened those 13mm bolts, so now we're able to get out these bolts from before, the self-locking ones. Just want to turn it. And there we go. And that's the self-locking mechanism, which is why we had to hammer it out. And take out the bottom one. Just a side note, once you replace both struts, your car is going to need a wheel alignment, so make sure you get that done. You're going to get a flathead screwdriver, and you're going to put it in here behind the knuckle, or next to the, in between the knuckle and the strut. And just be careful, you don't want to pry too much where you pull the axle out. There we go. Something I did, I just took a bungee cord and hooked it into the steering knuckle itself, because when the strut separated from the knuckle, I was afraid it was going to pull the axle out. So I just have this bungee cord running up to the engine bay, and I just have it hooked up in the engine bay just to keep it supported. Now we're just going to support the strut with one hand, and with our other hand we're going to reach up to the engine bay where that one bolt is holding the strut in, and we're going to unscrew that 13mm bolt with our fingers. And it just came off. And now we can carefully take out the strut. Now make sure before you're putting the new strut on that you have the hardware, the new hardware that came with it. You don't want to use the old hardware. You want to use the new hardware, the new nuts. It's a good idea to take the new hardware, put it up in the engine bay, so when you feed the new strut, when you feed the bolts through the holes up above, you could just tighten it down really quick with your fingers to hold it into place. So let's do that now. Just feed it up. Finger tighten all 3 nuts on so it's held into place. Now with the top nuts finger tightened on in the engine bay, we're gonna remove this bungee cord, and then we're gonna put the knuckle and reposition it onto the new strut. Now what you're going to need is your flathead screwdriver, just so when you get the top hole lined up, you can put your screwdriver in there to hold it into place. We're going to take our bottom bolt that we used before that we took out, and we're going to put it in. You might have to adjust the knuckle a bit. A little shaking. Then you can take your screwdriver out of the top hole and feed the top bolt through. You might have to jimmy it a bit. Now if you need to, you can take the hammer and just gently tap on the head of the bolt just until the grooves or the splines start to grab. Don't forget to put the plate holder for the ABS sensor back on. That just slides on the top and bottom bolt. Then we're going to finger tighten the bolts on, top and bottom. And then I'm going to tighten these down with the air gun, the top and bottom bolt. And then we want to tighten both these bolts down to 89 foot-pounds. Very important that you torque those down to the specs for your car. If you need to, this is a 2006 Chevy Cobalt. As I said, those are 89 foot-pounds for this vehicle. For your vehicle, you can look online and you'll be able to find the torque specs for those. Now you just want to put the ABS sensor back in here. As I mentioned earlier, mine's broken, so I'll get a zip tie and I'm going to zip tie mine on. And we're just going to feed the stabilizer link back through here. We're going to finger tighten the bolt on. And this bolt gets torqued down to 48 foot-pounds. Okay, we're going to support between the strut and the stabilizer bar with the 18mm wrench like we did before when we took the nut off, except this time we're putting the nut back on. And as I said, this gets torqued down to 48 foot-pounds. We're back up in the engine bay. These three 13mm nuts all get tightened to 15 foot-pounds. Okay, everything is torqued down to the specs, the proper specs. Didn't take too long to do the one side. I'm going to proceed to the other side and change out the passenger side strut. Whenever you're changing a strut, you always want to do it in pairs. When you go to put your tires back on for this 2006 Chevy Cobalt, the lug nut specs are 100 foot-pounds. So make sure you do the proper torquing of your lug nuts when you put the tires back on. I hope this video helped. Feel free to leave any comments down below, good, bad, or indifferent. I'd appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind, if this video did help you, if you could click on the like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I have videos out every Thursday and Friday at 12 noon. You might want to check my playlist. I have videos on home repairs, home maintenance, car repairs and maintenance, so you might find something else that might be helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.